Hi, everybody. Today's topic is going to be all about friendship, and I could probably do multiple parts with this too, or I might just wait and do the next part later. Ooh, did I get stung by some kind of bug or something? um, anyway, before we get started, I just wanted to tell you all about the Facebook group I created only a week ago, and it already has over 60 members, which I think is so cool. It just really surprised me that there's more of a desire or need for this than I thought. But the name of the group, which kind of explains it all, it is called um, Blind Users of Ray-Ban Meta Smart Glasses. So you can just do a search for that, and hope some of you are able to join, whether you're just thinking about possibly getting the glasses like I've talked about and worn in several of my videos, or whether you just want to learn about them and hear the pros and cons, or actually, if you own a pair, we'd really be happy to have you join and share your expertise. And it's just great how we can learn from others. It seems to be a pretty active group so far as well. So, yeah, that is cool. Um, and and I just did it. I was just gonna talk about things I'm trying to improve for these videos, and one of them is that I say too much. So I'm working on that, and I hate it when I misspeak, especially when I'm just totally oblivious and not aware. Like sometimes if I know I have said something wrong, I can hurry and correct it, but then other times I say something and don't even I am just blissfully unaware until I listen back to the video later. Like on a recent video, I was talking about caring for my parents, and I said that after my mom's stroke, she was like a 6 year old, and I should the actual answer is that she was more like a 3 year old after that. And then the other day, I talked about my son building this rotating table, and I shouldn't have said rotating, it's expanding table because it doesn't require any leaves or anything. It's pretty cool. I hope he makes one for the ranch because you can seat up to 10 people at this thing, and then it goes very much smaller than that, like 4 to 6 people or whatever. And all you have to do is like rotate this mechanism, and it gets much bigger. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, I used the wrong term there, and little things like that just bug me, especially when I know what I meant to say, but it just doesn't come out the way I intended. But you'll just have to all bear with me, and I'm sure I will improve over time. At least I have improved the sound quality of these videos, which is a good thing. Yay. um, so, as far as today's topic on friendship, airplane. The last time one went over, though, it sounded really loud to me, but it wasn't all that loud on the video. So I'm trusting that is the case this time, because there must be some kind of mic canceling where it only focuses in on my video, which is be a neat thing. So I'm going to trust that's the case. But yeah, a lot of friendships, unfortunately, over our lifetime, come to an end, and really they have to end. Um, there's just no way you could be close friends with all the people that you have come into contact with, or that maybe you had a close friendship with at one time. I mean, there's only so many hours in a day, and time just simply would not allow for that. Um, like you would just wear yourself out, or at least I know I would for sure. You just can't balance. There has to be a balance in there, and you have to like really prioritize like what you have time for when. And like I had some really good friends in college during the 4 years, that, and especially on these diary tapes that I've mentioned before that we found recently that talk about those days. It really brings back a lot of good memories of the gang. There were like 6 or 8 of us that we just always did things together, and I had the best roommate back then. And but we've kind of lost touch now. I mean, most of them are on my Facebook. Yay for Facebook! When it came out, like when I joined, probably about uh, wow, 15 years ago, somewhere around there, and was able to resume contact with people that you hadn't really talked to for a lot of years. And but it's still not the same as like being in close proximity to one another and seeing each other every day. And um, so yeah, that's just an example of how um, things just change over time, but it doesn't at all mean that the friendships at the time weren't totally legitimate and real and very special and necessary and all that good stuff. And maybe some friendships resume again after many years apart or whatever. You just never know what might happen. Um, and but so there's both sides. I mean, some people can be really hurt when close friendships end, and some people can feel really guilty. And I just want to encourage those of you who might be hurt just to try not to take it personally, although I'm sure that's easier said than done. But just try to give the person the benefit of the doubt and just realize that things, they might just need a temporary break, or they might just be unintentionally neglectful, which are two things that have been true of me in the past, which I'll get more into. Oh, and I meant to check the time too. Um, but I'm kind of reminded of this biography that I read of Nicholas Sparks, where this was many years ago when he was first married for a few years and had young kids, and was just going through a lot because he had a handicapped son. And there were just a lot of issues at his home and with his family. And then at the same time, his elderly parents, also really needed him, and they lived a distance a long ways away. So he was trying to help both of them. And he just said he always felt guilty. Like whenever he was at home with his family, he felt guilty that he wasn't spending more time with his parents. And whenever he was with his parents, he felt guilty that he wasn't with his family, or, yeah, with his wife and children. And so that just always stuck with me because I've felt that too, and that's just no way to live. You should just be try. You can only do your best, and so yeah. Sometimes I've like had to. I felt it at the time anyway that it was necessary for me to distance myself from people just because of things I was going through at the time, and but I knew it wasn't good and that I owed them an explanation and whatnot. But sometimes I just wasn't even sure how to explain myself to people, without giving them like too much information, that might make them feel uncomfortable, or just that I didn't have time to launch into a huge explanation, especially if there were like many people that were wondering or whatever, like who do you pick, or to explain to, and how much do you explain to who, and kind of can seem a little overwhelming. um, and so um, uh, I think a good practice in general is to try to prioritize friendships that you've had the longest, and that you felt the closest to. Especially, it's easier, I know, if you are in close proximity with them. It's harder when, like I said, there's a long distance, in miles between you. Um, And of course, I think when you're younger, you just have a lot more time for friendships too. At least that was the case for me. A lot of this is just anecdotal. I haven't like researched it or taken formal surveys or anything, but just my experience in general is that I just had a lot more time. Like my friend Lavette, we would send tapes to each other all the time, like pretty much everything we just taped for each other. We were pen pals since we were 12 years old. And yeah, and then sometimes though, as people get older, just life takes you in different directions. It's not really anybody's fault. And like my friend and I still talk to each other at least every 2 or 3 weeks usually. And but yeah, it's just harder. And sometimes there's like reasons, and sometimes there's not a specific reason that friendships have like are different than they used to be. But I think change is just something we have to expect um, as we navigate through life. And we might still be friends, but the nature of it's just different as you are now older, and you might have like kids or other family members and things that take some of the time. And fortunately, my friends have always been understanding, or tried to be at times when I haven't been the best friend. Um, and but yeah, so like sometimes I don't even, there's somebody that I might want to like get to know better, but I purposely like don't, because I don't feel like I'm the best friend to people that I've been close to for a lot longer or whatever, and just afraid that I would let them down and not have enough time for them. And you just kind of second guess yourself. And sometimes I wonder, like, if they knew this about me, would they still want to get to know me, or stuff like that. And so um, I think yeah, you just have to be able to try to adapt to changes in the friendship, um, and be, as you might become different and have less in common in some ways. Just like I've said in other videos, be willing to focus on the common ground that you still have. And there's you, I mean, always some kind of common ground that I think most people have if you really try and work at it, if the friendship is a priority for you. Um, and of course, it doesn't mean that you can't discuss topics where your opinions might differ, but you just have to be willing to really listen to the other person and keep an open mind, learn from them, and accept them as they are, without any like hopes that things might. I mean, it'd be great if some of the differences could be resolved, but if they don't, that's okay. And um, so yeah, and just put up with things that are less than perfect. That is something people definitely have to do with me. Like some of the things I'm not good at in friendships are that I rarely will initiate a phone call or an email or anything like that. Um, and I know some people can definitely, because some have even told me this has always been an issue for me, that they just feel like, why do they have to be? It really puts a burden on them, like the other person doesn't care as much, when I do care. But yeah, it's just not as easy for me. Part of my personality, or I guess, I mean, which isn't an excuse, and it's something you should work on, the things that you know you're not good at, to try to improve in those areas. Um, but I usually let somebody else suggest activities or things to do, and then now I do have more time for such things. So more often than not, I would probably say sure, or it, like being spontaneous, I think is a good thing to have in a friendship too. And but I'm just usually not the one to initiate for some reason. Um, and so people would say, like, why don't you ever come over more, or think of something to do, or whatever. And it's, and like I said, I'm afraid they interpret it as that I don't really want to. When that it's just more that it's not my area of that something I'm good at. Um, but I think there's just always strengths that that each of our friends brings to the relationship. Um, and Another thing about me is that I usually need prompting in order to open up to somebody, even if it's somebody that I like feel really comfortable with, like a close friend. Um, Sometimes I just think, they no need to get into that, or they might not really care or be that interested, or sometimes I just don't think of things to say necessarily unless someone like asks me directly, or then follows through, like asks me more questions or whatever. And usually I'm fine with answering people's questions, but they might take it as like they don't want to pry or dig too hard or ask too much, or um, so that was something that's been hard for some of my friends to grasp. And at first, I didn't even realize it myself till I just took the time to think about it more and tell them, you just have to ask me more questions. So then people have to be willing to do that, I guess, if they want to know more. But for most people, I think it is more natural for them to just be able to talk more easily, and than it is for me on a one on one type basis like that. But sometimes it can be interpreted as that I don't trust them, or like, why did I find this out about you on Facebook and you never said anything to me personally about it, which is understandable. So but something that's good about me, though, in turn, is that I'm a good listener. So I love it when people um, tell me what they're going through, and I think I'm a very good questioner, unless I feel like the person isn't comfortable with that. But I like to just get in there and find out what's going on, and so it's very rare that you can share too much information with me, because I just like to hear it all. Like if you're a close friend or whatever, and sometimes I like it when people talk more than I do, because I'm just not as much of a talker. So don't feel like you're like taking over the conversation or whatever, just because you're talking more, because it's just my natural tendency to talk less. Um, and but like then on the opposite end of the spectrum, like my son, especially, well, both of my kids really, um, I found that at least with me, they get overwhelmed with if I ask them too many questions. They just really don't like it at all and just back off and get all perturbed and whatnot. So I've just had to learn that not everybody is like me. Far from it. I mean, most people would probably, probably don't. I mean, um, I think like in that case, they're more likely to say more if I just leave them alone and let them get to it in their own time. And so I just had to realize that like they're the opposite of me in that regard. And it just took me a while to understand it, because your natural tendency is just to assume that everybody will respond best in the same way that we respond best. But that is definitely not the case. So we just kind of have to keep our differences in mind like that. Um, and of course, it's easy for friendships, for misunderstandings to develop, like some major and some minor. Um, we might have different assumptions or expectations with the relationship, and that the other person might just be totally oblivious to, but yet it seems obvious to us, like, you should know how I'm feeling, or you should know how you're acting, or whatever, and yet they genuinely don't. So it's just always best to keep those lines of communication open, um, and to not be afraid to like say what you're feeling in the relationship. Like if you are feeling hurt, and that then the other person can say, yeah, I understand that, this is where I'm coming from, and all that. And so sometimes I think, yeah, people just drop their old friendships and get, and there's a time for that, but just because they want something new or whatever, and then that new friendship might not last very long or be of good quality or whatever, as they anticipated. Um, and of course, your needs and availability might change. Like when I had young kids and I was homeschooling, at the end of the day, um, I was just like, didn't want to really talk to anybody. Like after the kids were in bed, I just wanted to do my own thing for a couple hours and just kind of regroup and stuff. And so, yeah, that was a time when I didn't really take care of my friendships like I should have. Um, but I hope that my friends always know that I I can be counted on if they need something. I mean, even if we haven't communicated for a while or whatever, I always want to be a person that would be able to do what I can to help if they were really in a pinch or whatever. And just like listening and brainstorming, like trying to help people with what might work in problems, but yet sometimes you just want a listening ear too. You don't necessarily want somebody to solve your problem, you just want them to care and be empathetic. Um, so, yeah, if I'm not always good about sharing my own problems, and if I'm going through a hard time, for me, I like to spend more time alone just with my thoughts or whatever, just to take time to rest and think or whatever. But it seems like most other people, at least in my sphere or circle of friends, like to talk out their problems more and like to share, which I really appreciate. Like I said, even though it's the opposite of me, I like it when people feel free and comfortable to share with me. But I'm not that way myself as much. Like a lot of usually later I'll open up to them more, but it might take me a while. So people just really have to be patient with me. Like in case you haven't figured this out, by if you've watched this much of the video, there's a lot of things that I'm not the greatest at in friendships. But let me see if there was anything more I wanted to say that's particularly important. Oh yeah, I talked about some of the reasons that like my friendships have changed over the years. And sometimes, like if you have really different philosophies of parenting, for example, that might put a strain on your friendship, like while the kids are younger, because um, you might just look at things really differently. And sometimes if you just have to accept those differences, and it might mean you have to take a break from the friendship for a while, or just not see each other as much, or see each other like when you don't have the kids with you. Now it's getting very windy, so that's kind of distracting here. um, and also, if one person's worldview has changed a lot, that could put a strain on the relationship. Like if you're suddenly on opposite ends of the spectrum politically or whatever. Unfortunately, like I said, my best friends, well, I guess that's the reason they're my closest friends, is that they are able to respect those differences, and we can even talk about them now, like without feeling uncomfortable or awkward or whatever. So yeah, but this is more for close, like your casual acquaintances. Sometimes you don't need to feel obligated to like bare your soul to them if you don't really think they want to understand or have the time to really listen or whatever. Um, which is something I had to learn, because at first, like I always wanted to explain myself. If you only understood my reasoning process or whatever, you would like change your own mind, or you might this and that. And I've just really realized that that's not the best way to go about things. And so yeah, so In summary, I think the best friendships should be able to withstand change and even expect change and be tolerant of it while still making your own needs in the relationship clear if possible. And if maintaining the friendship feels more like a chore, if you just feel like you have too much on your plate, you might have to um, think about making changes in like how often you see somebody and try to explain yourself if you can, even though it might be hurtful to the other person, um, because they're going to sense it and be insulted or hurt if you just kind of, yeah, just don't explain yourself in situations like that. And kind of like if you're in a romantic relationship, sometimes it might become too intense, or um, something changes in the relationship or whatever. So yeah, communication is always good, if possible, where you try to explain your reasons and be honest. Don't just give an excuse, because they'll see through that too. Like, that doesn't really add up. Because I mean, yeah, just try to be um, honest with each other, and don't be afraid to reach out to somebody that has kind of distanced themselves every now and then. Just kind of a little nudge like that, you just to show them that you still care. And and I haven't even addressed the whole issue of like betrayal and friendships. That's kind of a whole nother realm, um, that I guess is outside of the venue of this particular video, since I've been talking long enough. But those are just some of my thoughts in the things that I've experienced, and I hope you have found some of it helpful. Be sure to like and subscribe. Gliding Through Blindness is the name of my channel. Thanks very much. Bye. See you next time.